Here and we are live. Welcome everyone. A good warm welcome this afternoon here from Vienna and from Bethlehem in Palestine. My name is Simon Ilse. I'm the head of the Global Unit for Human Security of Heinrich-Böll-Stiftung based in Vienna. And I'm also at the moment interim office director of our office for Palestine and Jordan based out of Ramallah. And that is why we are here today with Dalia Kusam from the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights based in Bethlehem in the West Bank, Palestine. A very warm welcome, Dalia, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for hosting me, Simon. It's a pleasure to join you.
You're welcome. It's really my pleasure, and we're very happy to have Dalia. Dalia is a project partner also of the foundation, working with the Ramallah office on a variety of projects with regards to the political situation in Palestine, notably on annexation policies and the settlement expansion that we are unfortunately witnessing in the Bethlehem and Jerusalem areas, but we'll get to that. Today, our topic is there a Gazafication in the West Bank happening? That's basically a bit our guiding questions, and I think we have a lot to talk about today. And I would also like to invite the audience to post their questions in the chat wherever you are. If you're on LinkedIn, or on Zoom, just please send your questions in as soon as they get to your head, and then I will do my best to pass them on to Dalia. We will start by taking stock quickly of the situation in Palestine, the West Bank in particular, and ask Dalia actually what's the situation since the end of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas beginning of March. And then also talk about the work that Balasan Initiative for Human Rights is doing there to resist and document and inform about the situation. And then move one way up in abstraction, I would say, and talk about international law. And if this is an important and useful tool for the Palestinians in order to gain and advance self-determination. And then end by having looking into the future a little bit, into the political future of a potential peace process, hopefully. But there's lots, as I said, to talk about. Dalia, maybe we start by something very up to date. The Easter break is just behind us, and unfortunately, we saw a lot of violence, a lot of violations of international law, but also limitations for actually people of all faiths, but in this case, of course, Christians, not being able to reach and access, places of prayer and to really celebrate the Easter celebrations properly. So maybe that's a good way for you to take us into the reality in Bethlehem and in the West Bank in Palestine at the moment. Thank you.
Yeah, so maybe a quick comment on that. Actually, what you have seen, what we have reported as restrictions for us Palestinian Christians, even those of us in Bethlehem who are like 10 minutes away from Jerusalem, those restrictions that prohibit us from being able to celebrate Easter in our holy sites. These are nothing new, by the way. These are decades standing policies, and they started with the isolation of Jerusalem from the rest of Palestinian cities and from the millions of Palestinian people. This policy isolates Jerusalem. It's an Israeli policy, of course, and it isolates Jerusalem through two main types of restrictions. The first is administrative. So, we are categorized in different ID classifications, and this is something we published about through one of the common projects with the HBS. So us who hold a West Bank ID have no access to Jerusalem. That's the norm. And the exception would be if we get a permit from the Israeli military to actually visit Jerusalem. So the norm is the prohibition for millions of Palestinians from their capital. Not only our capital city, it's also of, the highest relevance in terms of, religious, cultural, economic, social, political. It's a hub, Jerusalem. So we can no longer access it because of this policy and the administrative restrictions. The other type of restrictions are the physical one. So the actual wall, we call it the annexation wall. Some others call it the barrier, but for us, we decide to name the wall as per its main objective. Its objective is to annex, and that's why we call it the annexation wall. So you have the annexation wall and the checkpoints. So with that, plus the actual assaults that are very well documented by the Israeli police against against clergy and Christian celebrants every single year during Holy Fire Saturday, basically are very prohibitive for us to participate, even if we have a permit. And this year, by the way, or actually since last year, we can no longer apply for permits from the churches. We have to download an Israeli-run app called Al-Munassiq, which means the coordinator, through which we apply. Invasive. I mean, you can understand all the reasons why you wouldn't want such kind of applications on your phone, especially for us human rights, or those of us working in the human rights domain. So the church was out in terms of mediating for applications for its own congregations. Now we have to directly download the app and get the permit through it. But even if you get the permit, we have received many reports this year of Palestinian Christians who tried to cross the designated checkpoint only to be returned. So they decided that their permits are just canceled because it's a very arbitrary process. Now, even in the best case scenario where you actually have your permit and you are able to cross, you would have to then face the additional hurdles and restrictions in terms of the Israeli police aggression and, blocking celebrants from accessing. And then also, like, even if all of the family gets such permits, you have to think, do you want to expose your children to this kind of volatile context? That basically is that's something people don't really believe, but I never was able to celebrate Easter during my life in Jerusalem because of this.
Wow. Okay. Wow, that's pretty devastating to hear. So, but the new thing about this is that actually all of the Palestinians need permits to enter Jerusalem, the governorate, and the new thing now is that there's less and less permits actually being issued. Plus, you have to go through this app to apply for a permit, and you can apply, but you don't know if it will be granted, right? Like how often is it granted? Would you say?
Yes, even if you apply, even if you receive a permit, and normally there's no such thing as indefinite permit. So whatever kind of permit you're filing for, if you need to do a medical checkup in one of the hospitals in Jerusalem, you have to justify, because the norm is that you're not allowed. The exception, you have to justify the exception. So for instance, I need a hospital appointment, or I need a consular appointment, or whatever it be, you will receive a permit that's very restricted in terms of the period that the permit is granted and the hours. You have to check in and out to prove that I went in this hour and I was back by this hour, and you have to cross by the designated checkpoint only.
Okay.
And also, like, we never addressed the very process of crossing a checkpoint, which is very humiliating and even life-threatening. It's not an exaggeration to say it's life-threatening, notably after October the 7th,
of
with
course,
the acceleration of violence at the checkpoints.
Yeah. So exactly. So if we look a bit at the bigger picture at the West Bank now, of course, since October 7th, 2023, there's been a spark, an increase in violence Gaza, of course, very, very visibly, but also in the West Bank, with settler violence and a lot of people actually being killed. I think the number stands at over 700 by now in the West Bank. But a bit more specifically, there was a lot of hope, of course, when the ceasefire entered into force in the beginning of March. And how has the situation played out in the West Bank since the beginning of March? Of course, in the meantime, hostilities have continued, unfortunately, in Gaza. We're hearing also reports about units, Israeli military units that were deployed to Gaza now being present in the West Bank. How does this play out in the field?
Yes, I think let's lay some context here. I think the subject of this live event is like Gazafication, and I found this term very interesting. It's not really an official term, if you want. It's not a legal term, at least yet.
We owe the audience an explanation what we mean by it, actually, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but my understanding of this term is making the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, or at least the West Bank, Gaza-like. This is what I understood from the Gazafication, as a governance model, if you want, for the purpose of forcibly displacing Palestinians and gaining permanent control over the occupied territory, of course, contrary to international law. But this includes basically transferring Israel's practices and wild-scale aggression in Gaza to the rest of the occupied Palestinian territory, elevating the scale of military aggression, destruction of property, destruction of vital services, excessive use of violence, militarization, the socio-economic strangulation, and basically the policies of collective punishment. But also the term Gazification supposes some kind of separation between the West Bank and Gaza, and that's really not accurate. These are artificial divisions. And the impacts of what happened post-October the 7th was immediately reflected in the West Bank. Now, what I talked about just now, the heavy militarization of the West Bank and the deterioration of every level, it's important to focus on the deterioration. It's nothing new. All of the policies that are ongoing now in the West Bank, they have been the case for decades. Israel has used the same policies for decades in the West Bank. We have always had the checkpoints, we have always had arrests, we have always had extrajudicial killings, settlements were already expanding. I mean, the year 2023 was already a record year in terms of human rights violations, specifically in extrajudicial killings, in settlement expansion and settler violence. We already had all of these policies going on. It's nothing that October the 7th introduced. What it did introduce, though, is the heavy militarization and the deterioration of every single policy of these. Every single one. It introduced new trends, just not new policies. Basically, seizing the opportunity of having the world attention on Gaza, the West Bank was going through this silently. So the extrajudicial killings skyrocketed, the expansion of the settlements skyrocketed, the demolitions have become fivefold, the arrest and torture, especially at the checkpoints, skyrocketed. I don't think any of the organizations is able to really capture in accurate numbers what's really going on here on a daily basis and cover the geographic scope. So what I'm saying is basically there has been a deterioration in the severity of the violations and a skyrocketing of the numbers of the violations. And also, we didn't talk about land confiscation. The methods and in numbers, it has also skyrocketed. And then, the very public call for annexation. Before October the 7th, the Israeli government was already conducting a de facto annexation. Post-October the 7th, we're seeing a different model of running the West Bank from military, because it's acknowledged under international law as occupied territory. So they're shifting the governance model from military to become more civil, and applying new trends in the process that I don't think we would have enough time to go through in this panel. But this is basically where we are standing in the West Bank. And honestly, nothing has changed post announcing this the ceasefire and the collapsing of the ceasefire. You know, the violations are ongoing at a steadily increasing rate here in the West Bank.
Yeah, and basically it started, I think, with since beginning of March with the clearing and demolitions in the Jenin refugee camp and Tulkarm and mostly in the north of the West Bank, right? And continued also now to the south and different areas. That would be interesting if you can just quickly tell us, like, what's the current status. And what's interesting, of course, what you said is that this is a new I mean, a trend towards a new model of moving from military occupation to more civil administration. So basically already regarding the West Bank as Israeli, or annexation, exactly, as their own land.
Yeah, referred to as de jure annexation in legal terms. And so basically annexation is the extension of the sovereignty of the occupying power into occupied territory. And this is prohibited under international law. There are no derogations permitted. It's just a red line that, you know, it's universally accepted that you cannot annex. It's not permissible. There can be no derogations to this rule. And just to show you the difference, for instance, when we say house demolitions are prohibited under international law, that's true, but you know, there are always the buts under international law, the exceptions. House demolitions are not permitted unless for military necessity, which is not the case when Israel conducts house demolitions. But for annexation, there are no exceptions. It's just prohibited, that's it.
And particularly for the West Bank, there's this the new advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice from last July. I say that basically calls Israel to clear all occupied territory and leave all settlements within 1 year. Or basically, it wasn't given. There wasn't a deadline in the advisory opinion, but the General Assembly, or was there? The General Assembly then clarified that it should be within 1 year, which would be until this September, I think, which unfortunately doesn't seem to be realistic as we can see. But yeah, okay. This is very
absolutely, it's very important, and I'm really happy to capitalize on the importance of this advisor opinion that you referred to. But before, I was making the point about the importance of, you know, just making sure that annexation is illegal in its both forms. It's de facto annexation, that's, you know, extending your sovereignty by permanent physical control of the territory, or be it de jure annexation, which is treating bylaws or extending the sovereignty through legislation, treating the occupied territory as part of your own, which also what Israel is advancing in or doing currently. So if we go back to the ICJ advisory opinion, I would like to add emphasis on the name. It starts with legal consequences of Israel's practices in the occupied Palestinian territory. And then legal consequences, this is what also the court capitalizes on. And it really places a lot of weight on international responsibility and the responsibility of the members of the international community, the UN, member states, and what have you. But it also clearly concluded that Israel's presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful. These are the terms of the court. And this is something as Palestinians we have said, you know, for the longest time. But, you know, Now having that also confirmed by the top judicial body in the international community, and with it laying out specifically what are the obligations of the member states and then the UN and its body and what have you, I think everyone should be asking what they are doing to make sure that they are in line with this decision. And the first thing that those who oppose the decision will tell you is that it's an advisory opinion. It's an advisory opinion. It means it does not automatically enforce, it doesn't have automatic enforceability, if you will. But it is the law, and the law is the law. And it should be everyone's responsibility to make sure that, you know, we protect this international legitimacy.
Absolutely, yeah. Couldn't agree more, and that actually quite elegantly moves us to the next question, or the second part. International law as a tool and as a vehicle for Palestinian self-determination and freedom. How do you're an international lawyer yourself? You're also a lawyer in Palestine, trying to use the law as a tool to limit further expansion of settlements and other things, and claim rights of Palestinians. And where do you stand on this? Basically, is international law, as it has been articulated and framed in the post World War II order, a rather useful or rather actually unuseful tool, basically cementing some of the status quo that is so painful for many Palestinians?
Yeah, look, this is one of the most asked questions recently, honestly. And
yeah.
I also honestly think for the right reasons, actually. This is everyone has the right to be revising how useful international law is. And, you know, the way that Israel has fragmented, I even say devoided international law of its very purpose over the decades, not only recently post-October the 7th, but really over the past decades, really makes this a very legitimate and understandable question. Now, my answer to this, it's I always have the same answer. You have to address it with a lot of expectations management. You know, it's a very limited tool. It's not meant to enforce itself. It's not. I want to say sadly, but it does not enforce itself automatically. It does rely on the member states who eventually, you know, are driven by their political powers and interests. So accordingly, you have to manage your expectations. Now, having that said, I don't want this to be understood that I'm advocating for discarding international law because it's a limited tool. Rather, the opposite. I'm saying that we need to think where it fails, where it lacks. We need to reform it, and we need to fortify it so that it becomes a better tool in ensuring, you know, world order, world peace, justice, so that, you know, it advances humanity the way it should be doing. I mean, this is the responsibility of the members of the international community, all of them. Israel did not fragment international law alone. International community in specific allowed it to do that over the decade without any accountability, and even contributed, you know, in many other ways to supporting Israel, contrary to their legal obligations. We always say that, you know, we're asking the international community to abide by their own legal obligations, and these are obligations under international law. So one of the most abhorrent examples, in my opinion, is the ICC finally issuing arrest warrants against the Israeli Prime Minister and the former Minister of Defense. And then, you know, in our understanding, these are legal procedures, these are automatic procedures. And then just for us to find out that even when you actually can get an enforceable tool from international law, then it is politicized, and member states can think that, you know, we don't want to enforce this. You know, this is sad news for everyone, because what is the alternative in this case? Absolute reign of power? Is that what, you know, this is what you get when you don't respect international law and fragment it to this point. And when you go there, honestly, this is bad news for everyone. And I think everyone in the world is starting to get a taste of what it means, you know, that the reign of absolute power, even in Europe, you know, the public
absolutely
for annexing, you know, Greenland, for example. And that's the thing about impunity. It does cross borders, and when it crosses borders, it becomes more aggravated and more severe.
Absolutely, and basically perpetuates itself with impunity, right? If the impunity basically empowers the next crime and the further escalation, and that seems to be also something that that we unfortunately sadly see with Gaza. A lot of the crimes that were basically constituted by ICC and even ICJ provisional measures not being held accountable, and then moving on to the West Bank, arguably. Can you still hear me? Yeah, sometimes I'm a bit freezing, but I hope it's okay. So, okay, great. So yeah, I mean, this is really something that we are at a crossroads in at the moment worldwide. I would say the right of the might seems to be really on the rise, and the Putin's, Trump's, and Netanyahu's seem to be really decided that that actually their country and their law and whatever they make of the law counts first, and any kind of international multilateral order or architecture of rules that we seem to agree on after World War II doesn't really apply to them. But it's that's why I think it's very true what you said, that it's a tool that needs to be continuously, that needs to live, and it needs to continuously be reformed and developed further for it to actually have some meaning also for people. Because if I don't know how you see it. If you work a lot with Palestinian civil society and young people, is international law actually a compass for them, something that means something for them? Because you talked about the what you refer to as the annexation wall. Here again, another advisory opinion from the ICJ in, I think, 2004, clearly stating that this wall is illegal and needs to be disbanded. No consequence, right? And the clear, I mean, the you know, you might like a wall or not, but the clear violation there is also that it doesn't respect any of the green lines and any of the kind of border crossings that were agreed to in Oslo or elsewhere. So so yeah, how does this resonate actually in Palestine?
I mean, you asked about the youth in particular, and yeah, I mean, can you blame them? Less and less so, actually. They are less and less concerned with international law and, you know, the values that it represents. And you can't blame them, because they can see that, honestly, I say it over and again, it has been devoided from its whole purpose. Like, you know, it serves for nothing here in Palestine. The situation on the ground has zero respect or consideration for international law. And this is something of great concern for us. Like, you know, do we want the future generation to be one that has, you know, witnessed the logic of power in such brutal ways, and how this will shape them as a future generation? You know, how can we convince them of the values of justice, for example, when they see, or they're witnessing, or they're growing up in the midst of this very harsh reality? So, and it's something, honestly, on us as the Palestinians, this is something that we will, deal with, I guess, as we progress. As a society, we need to see how we heal from all of these atrocious violations and atrocities that have been inflicted on us for decades. And I think it's going to be a process. But also, without dealing with the root cause, no healing can ever start. We need to address the root cause, stop what's going on over the short term, stop what's going on immediately. Then justice must prevail, accountability must prevail. We need to end this impunity. And then us as a Palestinian can as a collective and as individual can really start this healing process.
Yeah, thank you. So just as a follow-up, maybe also for the audience, what is the root cause for you? This impunity or this lack of accountability?
Yes, that's what allowed the oppression of the Palestinians to go on for decades. If we had accountability, if this impunity was addressed since the outset, we wouldn't be here in the first place. I know October the 7th came as a surprise for many people, but us as Palestinians, especially us working in this domain, we've been saying that if you as international community keep failing to address these violations, we're going to have an explosion of the situation. Because things have been regressing on the ground in horrible ways. As I said, 2023 was a record year even before October the 7th. If there's nothing done to stop this, the situation will explode. It didn't come really like, yes, a surprise in some ways, but we already saw that, there is going to be a point of no return here because of failure to address, the ongoing multi-layered Israeli violations over the decades, where Palestinians can do nothing acceptable to stop it at all. Even when we go to, when we use international law, that's called lawfare. We are harassed, we are defunded, we are subject even to designations of terrorism. Even organizations who use Israeli law, which is very disadvantageous for Palestinians, even those Israeli law were labeled as terrorist organizations, human rights organizations. Nonviolent resistance equally suppressed. Violent resistance or armed resistance, you pay for this with your life as a Palestinian. So there's no form of resistance that would be acceptable. Any form of resistance will be met with brutal violence that, sometimes you pay for it with your life, as happens all the time. So in light of this,
which is also the case for example, the boycott campaign as a nonviolent means, also immediately being disqualified and attacked internationally.
Demonstrations, I witnessed.
But sorry, I didn't want to break you up.
No, please, Simon. So even going on very peaceful demonstrations where you have children, or anything, even open air masses that we held in the Bethlehem Governorate just to pray for peace, were also equally met with a lot of violence and tear gas bombs and assaulting those who are praying, any form of resistance and saying no to the oppression, just calling for your basic fundamental human rights and dignity and safety, just like anyone else. This, if you call for that as a Palestinian, you will pay the price. So in light of this, what do you expect would happen?
Yeah, very true. Okay, we have a first question here actually. Before it actually fits in quite nicely because it addresses the role of the international community and Germany in this case. And I think we can spend a bit of time on this now before going to the outlook and also looking at potential political hope in Palestine. Let's see. So Christina Mayman, senior researcher at SAFE, is asking, aside from the United States, Germany has probably protecting Israel from accountability for its crimes in Palestine. I would be interested to hear both from Simon and Dalia on whether that can change anytime soon, and if yes, how. You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to address this in the broader context of the role of the EU and Europe, if that's okay. So I think it's a very timely question, and let's also talk about this in comparison to the US policy, especially nowadays with the Trump administration. So I think there's a strategic window of opportunity open now for Europe to do a drastic change in its position. No longer empty calls for a two-state solution that are unaccompanied with any action. Recycled statements, I would say, that mean nothing. It's just an empty rhetoric at this point. Everyone is aware of that. So although I'm not really sure about the political interest or the will of Europe, but I think it's a strategic opportunity for a global diplomatic leadership role nowadays, in line with international law and legitimacy. I must stress that. Now, if you ask me, it's not only an opportunity for Europe and for Germany, it's a must. I think Europe and Germany should want to distance themselves as much as possible from the US policies, which are in grave violation of everything international law, truly. And it should want to rectify its position, because currently, you know, we can argue legally that many European states and the EU itself is complicit in the crimes that are committed against the Palestinian people, in the violations that are committed, and of a very serious nature. Specifically, we're talking about the arms delivery. And then also, like the EU and Germany should want to listen to their people who are going in masses, in their thousands and hundreds of thousands, in demonstrations for, you know, calling for a ceasefire, for the rights of the Palestinian people, for their right to self-determination. And they should also listen to their civil society working there, of which we are partners, who are calling for the respect of international law and for a shift in the EU and in Germany's position. And I think Germany is also a specific case. We are in touch with our German partners. We know also what happened there, the crackdown on any voices who are calling for the Palestinian rights, and even taking it to the extremes in Germany, for all the context that we are all aware of. Now, currently, there's a big loss of the US credibility, and I think there's a shift in the way that Palestinians or the world views the US from a biased mediator, if you want, to a fully complicit partner, the enabler of all the violations that are going here. So a more active European and German role can include one where it starts to call for the literal application of their obligations under international law. And international law, again, if we're referencing also the ICJ advisory opinion of 2024 pardon, it says two kinds of obligations. One, the active one, where you have to take action to stop these violations from going on. These include
to prevent genocide.
Sanctions. There's a menu of those: revising diplomatic relations, downgrading them if you must, revising free trade agreements. There's a whole, there's a whole menu of what states can do to stop that, to pressure Israel to halt its violation. And then also the negative ones, not recognizing, not aiding, not abetting, not all of these. Because honestly, in Palestine, at some point, everyone will be held accountable. Israel will be held accountable. That's something, now it sounds not very possible, but over the long run, this is going to be the case. But also everyone who aided Israel will be. Those who delivered the arms. I mean, also in the legal terms, this is complicity. This is complicity. And those who gave strategic protection, military assistance, diplomatic and political cover, all of these. I mean, there's a big room for action that aligns with, first of all, the German legal obligation and then the EU as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we already talked about, if impunity gets to everyone eventually, and in Europe specifically, you have seen, for example, I talked about the open calls to annex Greenland. I think Europe should want to distance itself from the state of lawlessness and the absolute reign of power.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think you're right that there is an opportunity, even though especially Germany, but also Europe at large, has equally lost a lot of credibility in the Arab world at large, but in Palestine especially. But there's still an opportunity, I would say, now in the face of Trump and these Trump Riviera crazy ideas and open calls for displacement and annexation, to have a different position, to really form a European position that is based on international law and takes it seriously and especially stops these double standards and double standards with regards to Ukraine and to Gaza, and I think this idea, this little visit by Macron last week, where he went to see Sisi and kind of try to also criticize the Trump project for Gaza and said that the Europeans should come up with their own thing, was again very typical Macron in a way that he's good at communicating these things and showing that there's still a European voice that is different, but it lacks, as always, substantiation and action. Exactly. But one thing I can tell to Christina is I shared it with you, Dalia, as well yesterday. There's a letter by pretty high-ranking diplomats, all former ambassadors of Germany to Arab capitals, from Damascus to Ramallah to Cairo, calling for a change in the German position towards Israel-Palestine and towards the conflict, and also calling out double standards. And we'll see what if these are not first, but like some more serious cracks in this position, because they wrote this letter as also an opinion that is apparently widely shared in the German administration and in the Foreign Office. And I think it's good that some of these people are going forward to address this, because this is really something that cannot be ignored and just managed along the way, and just that the German government hopes that it will pass on and will disappear. This will not disappear and will be very well remembered. When I look at the new German government that is incoming now, I'm not super hopeful, I have to say. But let's see, maybe they surprise us with something positive in this regard. And my biggest advice always to this incoming government would also be to really turn around the security question. If you really want security for Israel, then this kind of policy that the Netanyahu government is waging has to stop immediately. And the international legal considerations and frameworks that are there are, if respected by both parties, are here to bring stability. And you're not enforcing these kind of frameworks by delivering arms to one side. And I agree with you, Dalia, that this will most probably have consequences. I know that the Green part in that last government tried to at least slow down some of and block for a certain time certain arms deliveries, but it was in vain in the end. The public pressure was too strong, it seems, and this is not enough, of course. So
add a few points.
Sure.
So on the question of, what's the solution and security and issues like that, I think without looking at the root cause of all of this, I don't think anyone will be safe. I don't think there's any stable solution without addressing the root cause of this. I think if Palestinians continue to be oppressed, there will always be one way or other of resistance. You cannot subjugate and oppress a population forever. That's not a strategy to live by. It doesn't bring peace or safety to anyone, even those who are in control, who have the upper hand. So I think any kind of solution must address the root cause, must ensure that Palestinians have their fundamental rights as enshrined under international law, and must be accompanied by meaningful action. There can be no longer, just doing the lip service and repeating the recycled statements without any action, while we continue to witness the situation deteriorate on the ground. This is not possible. And also, we always hear that the recent Israeli government is this, the recent Israeli government is that. These are not the cause of the problem. They are one of the symptoms, This new government did not introduce, again, any new policy. These policies have been ongoing long before this government came into power. It just made them worse because of the impunity, because of how radicalized the Israeli society has become. But these, I can't say, like, before this government, there was no peace here. Palestinians were already being subjected under brutal military rule in the West Bank and under a blockade in Gaza long before this government came to power. So it was important to clarify these things. And another issue, this discussion reminded me of the humanitarian aid discussion. It's very, very important to ensure humanitarian aid. Starvation is, it's one of the gravest crimes that can be committed in Gaza. But so ensuring that is put to an end, and then that being one of the reasons why there was arrest warrants against Netanyahu and Gallant, the former defense minister. And then the question of humanitarian aid and the importance of delivering that is absolutely necessary to do everything to ensure the delivery of that. But this also does not resolve the issue. We're not seekers of humanitarian aid. We are seekers of our rights, and these are rights. They're not favors. We're not asking the world for favors. These are our rights. We will get our rights. We want to get our rights. But humanitarian aid does not replace rights. So it was just important to make this point.
No, totally. Thank you for clarifying that. You're absolutely right. And it's sometimes, it just goes to show how long the road to peace is, really, right? In the end, but thank you actually for sketching out what kind of elements, what kind of milestones there have to be. If I understood you correctly, so I think a first step would, of course, be a complete ceasefire and stop of hostilities and violence. The accessibility of humanitarian aid to Gaza and to the population in general, and then a full, basically, withdrawal from occupied territories, right? Stopping the occupation, and only then we can actually talk about a two-state, one-state, whatever state solution. But I think these are preconditions in a way that are completely legitimate and incredible if you really wanna work on peace in the region.
Yes, I think it's up to the Palestinian people. Then we have the right to self-determination, just like any other people in the world. And I think what kind of governance Palestinians will be choosing, that I think that's for a later stage. But now, in the immediate short term, I think all these atrocious, oppressive policies need to cease immediately, and this is in line with international law. as an international legal practitioner, I always cite international law. But before that, our humanity should tell us that, this is wrong and this has to.
Absolutely. And that's actually a nice way to go into the final lab about an outlook to the future. Just recently, actually, it's always has to be taken with a pinch of salt, but Hamas offered to transfer power actually to the PLO in Gaza. How do you see the political future actually for the of Palestine as such? Could you dissect a little bit for us the also differences between PA, PLO, and where do you see figures, perhaps organizations, something building up for a dignified Palestinian representation?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in my opinion, because normally Europeans or the EU and EU countries like to talk about reforming the PA. So and we reform the PA and everything, goes rainbows and butterflies after that. That's not the case. I mean, it's not, for me, it's not either reforming the PA or reforming the PLO, because this is also one of the suggestions. In my opinion, one thing leads to another. Now, we have to understand the nature and structure of each one of those. So the Palestinian Authority is one of the main outcomes of the Oslo Accords that were concluded between the PLO and Israel. And it rules over the West Bank, and not all of the West Bank. The West Bank is only 22% of historic Palestine, by the way. It rules over basically area A of the West Bank, which are less than 20% of total of the OPT. And this rule is, it's not complete sovereignty. It's very theoretical, because in reality, every day the Israeli forces, they raid into areas A. Even recently, we're seeing them deliver demolition orders to people inside areas A. So
that's a new escalation, huh? I mean, because this is
Yes, because normally I'm not sure how familiar the audience is in terms of the artificial division of the OPT into areas A, B, and C. But normally Israeli demolitions are concentrated towards area C. A recent development is their extension into areas B and A. So inside areas that the PA should rule. And again, so it does not even cover the entirety of the OPT, it does not cover Gaza, does not cover the refugee camps outside of Palestine.
OPT meaning occupied Palestine, right?
Yes, it does not cover. So basically, it's just to sum it up, it's very limited in terms of territory, and actual sovereignty is very limited. You can't say that this is state sovereignty in real terms. So the PA basically is an administrative body. That's how I would call it, with limited sovereignty. The PLO, however, on the other hand, is the sole and legitimate representative of Palestinians everywhere. It was created as a liberation movement, and it is the umbrella, if you want, under which any Palestinian governance should function. And the umbrella under which Palestinians and all of their factions should be able to, or on political movements, should be able to practice the right to self-determination. Now, the PLO in its current state is fragmented, is marginalized. I think it still doesn't include all the Palestinian factions like Hamas or the Islamic Jihad. No elections are taking place, so it's not being up to date in terms of democracy. And it needs to be both reformed and revived, if you want to, and also to include the youth and all of the Palestinians everywhere. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you reform, because again, this is an idea that Europeans love to capitalize on. If you reform the PA alone, that's insufficient at all. it's as if, for example, the foundations of your house are not functioning well, but you decide to fix one room in it. The other way around should fix the PA as well. If you revive the PLO, reform the PLO, and then, you know, it should also fix the PA if this is the form of the governance that us Palestinians decide that we still want to maintain and keep after we practice our life, the right to self-determination. And whatever you fix, PLO, PA, what have you, the root cause must be addressed. Because now, again, if we reference back the European idea of reforming the PA, you can make it, for example, cost effective, but still its actual authorities are very municipal. What are you going to do about that? They cannot protect Palestinians. No one can protect Palestinians, not the PA. You know, military raids are ongoing, as I said, in areas A. Who protects us? Who protects the Palestinians in area C who are being aggressed by the Israeli settlers on a daily basis, who are being forcibly displaced from their communities as a result of this atrocious violence? So, you know, making the PA cost effective or, you know, appointing a few young women ministers here and there does not, unfortunately, address the root cause of the multi-layer oppression that we are facing as Palestinians.
That's a great point, actually, that you're completely right. And it's very interesting that any future Palestinian political representation can only gain legitimacy by the Palestinians by actually protecting them and ensuring the human security in the end of Palestinians. So the right to, yeah, absolutely. Is there, yeah, of course, there's of course also a lot of political actors, former PLO leaders that are still imprisoned in Israel. That is also part of that story. But do you see formations or groupings that are politically organizing that are more promising than others at the moment, or is this like not the moment?
Unfortunately, it's hard to have any grassroots leadership at this point. I mean, there's a pretty strong crackdown on any kind of grassroots movement that tries to emerge, even the ones that are, you know, from the youth who are very able to represent their cause, who are not politically affiliated necessarily with anyone, who just want to serve. There is a strong crackdown on you know, grassroots leaderships.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think it's 3 o'clock now. Vienna, I think 4 o'clock Palestinian time. Is there anything else you wanted to absolutely mention? I don't see any more questions, but people will be able to rewatch this recording on LinkedIn and YouTube. What we will definitely do is to share documents, very interesting studies that the Balasan Initiative for Human Rights under your leadership is producing on the settlement expansion in the Bethlehem area, but also the study on IDs, which I find very interesting and telling about the situation. We can also share the letter by German diplomats that we mentioned on our networks. Anything else that you wanted to? Actually,
because for those who don't like really to read, we have infographics and fact sheets. We also have the section on digital media, which has, you know, short movies and short documentaries and a podcast. So, you know, we have different tools for different causes. But yes, if I would like to conclude with anything, is really a call for those who don't know what's going on to really educate themselves.
Yeah.
Help raise an awareness and ask how they can elevate Palestinian voices in their respective countries and using their field and area of expertise. What can each and everyone do in their capacity to advance Palestinian rights in accordance with international law, and pressure their representatives to be in line with that? So, you know, it's people like to donate. Yes, it's good to give money, but not only that. There's a lot more that can be done where meaningful action can be taken, or influencing meaningful action, you know, especially in Germany. There's not a, you know, there's room for more Palestinian voices and narratives in Germany, definitely.
Thanks for not giving up on Germany, Dalia. That's encouraging to hear. Thank you. No, this was a very important call. At the end, I can only support and second what you said. And thanks so much, Dalia, for your time, for being here. Shukran jazilan. I hope we'll see each other next week in Palestine. And thank you all to the audience for joining us, for tuning in, and for perhaps rewatching this. We will be back with this series of live conversations about human security topics around the world. And please let us know what you think about it, what we can improve. Give us comments and feedback. Thank you, Dalia, for today. This was great to have you.
Thank you, Simon. Likewise. Thank you.